Hello, everyone, and welcome to Tales of Our Times. This is a show where we discuss the stories that move us, what makes them so meaningful, and why others could or should find meaning in them as well. This is not a spoiler-free show, so bear that in mind as you continue to listen. We tackle books, movies, comics, and more. Where there's a story, there's a reason to read. I'm your host, Amanda Stevens, and as you might have guessed, this is going to be another special format episode. I like to close out the year by hitting up some of our previous guests and some of my fellow hosts to ask them what story grabbed them the most in the last year, 2024, and what made it so special or meaningful to them. For this episode, we're mostly going to skip over the summaries, but there may be a few spoilers, so that warning still applies. Either way, I hope you're looking forward to it as much as I am. And without further ado, let's get into it. So, welcome, Cat Trites.
Hello.
You're our first guest for this year-end review.
Me.
Is there anything that you would like to say to introduce yourself? And then I'll say a little bit more of why I personally wanted to talk to you.
Sounds good. I'm Kat. I read a lot. I love literature.
You studied literature
I studied
also.
literature, yeah. I'm big into books.
It's true. Well, that's also one reason why I wanted to talk to you. Another reason I really wanted to talk to you is because I know that, one, you read a lot. You're a voracious reader.
Yes.
For the audience, do you have any idea, like, how many books do you think you have read this year?
I don't know for sure because I try to follow it on like Goodreads, but then I forget to update Goodreads for a while. I think Goodreads I'm at like 8, which is vastly underselling what I've actually read.
I have personally talked to you about maybe 8 this year.
Yeah, I think you
so
and I
don't
have talked
think
about at
that's
least 8
true.
books.
I'm going to put it at like 12.
Probably
24.
closer to somewhere between 15 and 20, yeah.
Now, one of the reasons, besides you being a voracious reader, that I wanted to talk to you is because I know that you're really active in like youth and children's literature.
Yeah, I am, yeah.
And I think that's a really valuable source of knowledge. I think it's a really good opportunity for adults even to read and find some clarity.
One of my favorite things is if I don't know something, I'll find it in a children's book.
It's true.
Because it's an easy to understand, it's accessible, and it explains things in a fun, cute way.
Getting to that, what is one of your top stories from 2024, from the last year?
Yeah. My absolute favorite book that I've read this year is The Adventures of Amina Al-Sirafi by Shannon Chakraborty.
I am really excited about this because this is a book I want to read. You told me about it right after you finished it.
I definitely want you to read it. I also would love to talk more in depth about this at some point, but I won't get too far into it.
You won't spoil it for me yet.
Yeah.
What is like a quick clip that the book is about?
So it is like Pirates of the Caribbean if Pirates of the Caribbean had a female captain and was set on the Indian Ocean, primarily towards like Yemen and the north part of the Indian Ocean.
Mm-hmm. And then we were just talking about like books like this are really good at explaining things. Do you think that you need to have any kind of background information, or is it
Absolutely
easy?
Not.
Like
you
the
don't need
layperson can just pick it up.
100%. It is like historical fantasy, so you don't have to have any background in history. You don't have to have any background in the area.
Yeah.
You can just pick it up and enjoy it. It's very fun.
Okay, so then let's get into what about this made it one of your top reads, or even I just said top stories, right? So theoretically, you could have picked a movie. I didn't tell you one way or the other.
I always default to books.
Yeah. What made this one of your top stories of 2024?
I enjoyed this story so much because of the way that it is told. And what really got me was there's a surprise at the ending, and I'm not going to tell you what it is.
Oh, no.
The surprise at the ending made me cry, tears of joy.
It's not a sad
It's not
twist.
a sad twist. It gave me such joy, and it felt very empowering, and it was just a delightful ending.
Could you give us a hint at what type of twist it is? Like, is it a fourth wall breaking twist? Is it something about the character herself? I'm so curious.
It concerns the narrator of the piece. So we go through the whole story, and the story is told as if a journalist is interviewing Amina Al-Sirafi.
Yeah.
So the story is told from Amina's perspective, but with the interspersions of a narrator who is asking her questions and trying to coax the story out of her.
Okay. Yeah. That's fun.
So at the very end of the story, we learn something about the narrator that is delightful.
Wow. So then what's your pitch? Like, this is why you should check it out.
It is the best mix of genres and storytelling, and it's just such a fun book to read. Everything about it was delightful. Amina's voice, as she tells it, she doesn't want to be telling the story, but she's going to tell you a dang good story if she's going to tell this story.
Kind of like a humble brag.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I didn't want to bring it up, but I
but
did
also,
kill the Kraken.
I did do this thing. And my ex-husband was along, and he happens to be this very impressively cool man. And
he was Blackbeard, the good guy,
exactly.
not Blackbeard, the bad guy.
So it's very,
charming.
very fun to read, yeah.
Okay, well, thanks, Kat.
Yeah.
I appreciate your insights. And happy 2024 to you.
Thank you. Happy 24.
And I guess happy 2025 for the new year.
That's what I was going to say, and
I know.
Blinked.
Here we are. Kyle Swayne, welcome back. Thank you for joining me on my show again.
Thank you for having me on your show again.
Is there anything that you would like to say to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'll reintroduce myself.
Yeah.
I am a mid-30-year-old, like 35, and live in Taiwan. Lived in Taipei for nearly a decade now. I love to read. I'm an AP Literature and Language teacher, and I learned to really love literature kind of late in life, like short stories.
Well, that's actually why I wanted to talk to you about this year, especially because you're one of the few people I know in Taiwan who actually does teach literature for your job, but also your own personal specialty, or the one that you just professed to like the most, is short stories, which I feel like for me, it's the thing that I have most time for now. Like, I'm really tired after work, so I don't have the attention span to give to like these really long, winding tales. And I think there's a lot of value in the concision.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the biggest reasons that I like them is you don't have to invest in this really long thing. And moreover, the authors have to concentrate everything into those 7, 12, 15 pages. So every metaphor, every literary device, everything is very much apparent, and you can kind of digest it a little bit more easily and really enjoy it more, you know?
Doing the most with the least, right?
Precisely.
On that note, what story stuck out to you the most in 2024?
So 2023 and 2024, actually.
Ooh.
One of the more formative stories that I read was The Yellow Wallpaper. And I went from teaching middle school students to high school students. And over that time, I taught many, many short stories, but I think this was my favorite one. The Yellow Wallpaper is a story that deals with a lady and her husband who go to the countryside and rent a large mansion where they stay for, I think it was 3 weeks. And the reason why they're doing that is her husband is a physician who cares a lot about her, but is quite condescending to her. And he's treating her for, hysteria. Because at that time period, of course, what would you, And so actually, in reality, at that time, one of the ways that they would actually treat women is that they would have a rest. And by rest, it's not like you get to chill out. It's like you are trapped in a room and everyone does everything for you, and you are not allowed to have any creative outlets because that could exacerbate any negative thoughts or like psychoses that you might have.
This kind of sounds like it's solitary confinement.
Yeah, pretty much.
If anyone doesn't know, hysteria today, we've realized that it's not a real thing, but it was treated as a medical disease for any heightened state of excitement. And sometimes a normal emotion would be just kind of chalked up to hysteria and treated as though like a medical insanity almost. So let's actually move on then from there. What stuck out to you about this story from not just one, but across 2 years?
Sure. Well, when I was teaching the middles, I have a class that is almost entirely girls minus 2 boys. And so I wanted to teach feminism because I felt that a lot of the short stories you read are very like male-centric, European-centric.
English language literature, there's a lot of like, this is about a guy who did a thing. So
Yeah. And well, the good thing is also all the girls love creepy stuff. So
nice.
This specific story has a lot of like projection of people basically suffering throughout the book, only women, right? She's dealing with a mental condition that basically gets worsened because of the, in quotation marks, treatment that she's receiving. She's trapped in this room with this ugly yellow wallpaper where she envisions herself, or she envisions a woman that she wants to release by pulling these yellow wallpaper bars off the wall that is puke colored. But I think the thing that really resonated with me was I really wanted to give the young women in my class the perspective of there is a lot of representation of women being oppressed, and we can lift up women, but then also at the same time it dealt with mental health as well. And for me, like personally, as someone with ADHD who has a lot of like executive dysfunction and people being really terrible to me and not actually like trying to understand what it's like, it's kind of like my own struggle of everyone suggesting what I should do and nothing actually being useful because no one actually understands it, and then just being condescended to. It kind of just resonated on so many different levels. I am also sick of the patriarchy because it's oppressive for LGBTQ people as well. So
sounds like it's a really good outlet in that way, you know, for kind of like seeing of you even in the past of somebody who like, I know what the problem is. I know what the solution is. And somebody else, you know, like a system of power, the patriarchy, the medical institution, the whoever else, you know, being like, no, we'll treat you from the outside without trying to like understand what the problem is. So
yeah, exactly. And luckily that kind of led from there into all these really great classical short stories that the students really enjoyed.
So I asked Kat this question, and I want to ask if you were to like give somebody a pitch as to why they should read this book in the next year, in 2025, what would that be?
Yeah, I think the thing that really, for me, as a pitch that I could use to get people to read it would be, this story could be interpreted in so many different ways. It's relatable and creepy. And if you've ever been out of your mind, you can kind of feel the way that she did when you're like trapped by yourself and you can't escape, making the horror even more relatable to you.
Yay. I love when horror stories get mentioned. So an extra thanks for that, Kyle. I really appreciate it always. Happy New Year. Happy 2024. And
happy Christmas.
Yeah, and happy Christmas. We're recording this before Christmas. And happy Christmas.
Thank you.
All right, and welcome, Hanna.
Yes, on any time. This is always really fun for me.
So some people have hopefully heard you on your show, Retro Reels.
I hope so. It's a bit niche. I'm not sure how many listeners I have apart from my loyal fans, my parents. But
same.
Yes, I do retro reels, and I cover the old stuff. Some extremely old, some almost 100 years old.
What's the oldest movie you've watched?
Probably,
at least this year, I guess.
This year, I rewatched an old movie called Freaks. This was like pre-code era. So it's 1932 that this one was made. And it's actually, it's not my story of the year. It's just one that I like to go back to when I'm reminded of it, because it was one of the first movies. Shows? No, it's actually one of the first movies to include people like with very obvious disabilities. It was, like I said, pre-code, so very problematic looking back, but at the same time, it's a very humanistic treatment of them. Yeah. When you watch it now, it's surprisingly not as exploitative as you think it would be. So that's one of the oldest that I have watched, that I like to watch repeatedly. It's pretty amazing.
But I'm getting off track. Hanna, what was your movie, or the movie that like stuck with you the most or stuck out to you the most in 2024? It wasn't Freaks, you said.
No, it wasn't Freaks, although I love to watch Freaks whenever I feel like it. The movie that stuck with me the most this year is this old British flick from 1947. It's called Black Narcissus. And it's dated for sure. It's obviously problematic in its own way, especially since it's set in India toward the end of British colonial rule. On the bright side, it reads as like a criticism of that rule, but it's amazing because it is an erotic story about nuns.
What?
And that is always spicy and interesting.
Wow. So, okay, I mean, this obviously leads to the next question. What stuck with you the most about this movie, or like what made it your story for 2024?
It wasn't just the story itself, but also it's really it's got these beautiful painted backdrops in certain scenes, and they play with the angles and trick your eyes into thinking you're seeing like tremendous distances. You know, and they don't do that anymore in modern movies. And it got me thinking about how much acting takes place in front of green screens now. You don't see movie magic like that in the modern day. So that really stayed with me from Black Narcissus. And I mean, it's like you can tell what you're looking at isn't real, but it's a really good illusion, like really good.
Has it changed the way, like, I don't know if this was the first time you've seen it, but like after watching it this year also, do you think that it has like changed the way that you watched the movies after that, or that you've looked at modern films as you watch them?
I always feel a little bit sad about seeing as much CGI as I do in movies now. So when I see some practical effect like that from an old movie that is really distinctive, because I mean they've used that trick a lot in a lot of old movies, but in Black Narcissus in particular, it's like extremely gorgeous. So that's really why it stood out to me. And I just thought how much we've lost by becoming more technologically advanced.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's also, like, people do say that about practical effects movies, like Jurassic Park, the original one, because they opted for practical effects with most of their dinosaurs. And it actually looks better for it, like, having aged the way it has.
I think so, too. And actually, I am seeing a bit of a resurgence in practical effects in the modern day, especially with the recent body horror movies coming out. That seems to be on trend again. So I'm kind of glad for that. What was that? What's the one that just came out recently?
The Substance?
The Substance. That's
Substance?
it. Yes. Yeah. It could just be like, you know, some rumor people spread. People were saying it was making spectators throw up in theater. And one reason was because it just looks extra visceral for having used practical effects. And that's the movie magic that we're missing out on these days. I'm glad that's coming back.
Oh, you answered my, like, secret third question, which was about a bee. Like, do you feel like there is a movie today that is kind of returning to that? Which is interesting. I feel like in that way, horror, in being niche, I think it lets it experiment a little bit more than some of the other genres, because it doesn't have to necessarily be afraid of messing up in the same ways. It's not usually up for awards. It's always going to be a little counterculture in addressing these, like, gross or scary things. So
yeah, horror has never been a prestige genre, so they get to be more flexible, have more fun, experiment more, and honestly, it pays off a lot of the time.
We'll end this one with, if you were to say why somebody should watch Black Narcissus, you said it was. We've talked about 3 movies here, but the one that stuck with you the most was Black Narcissus.
My pitch for Black Narcissus: hot nuns. It's 2 words, hot nuns. That's all you got to know. Hot nuns losing their minds. That's my pitch.
And isn't that how we should close out 2024? Well, Hanna, thank you so much for coming on my show again. And, you know, I hope more people, like, if you want more of this, listen to Retro Reels. And, you know, Happy New Year, Hanna. Happy 2024. No, I did it again. Happy 2025. And unfortunately, that's all the time that we have for today. So thank you so much. You have been listening to Tales of Our Time on Radio Taiwan International. And a special thanks to my friends and co-hosts, Cat Trites, Kyle Swayne, and Hanna Bilinski, for joining me on this show. I hope that you enjoyed listening. And on a special final note, thank you, of course, to you listeners. Whether you listen on the internet, on our podcast, new this year, or on the radio, it's your listenership that makes this possible and really special. So from all of us here at Radio Taiwan International, but especially from me here at Tales of Our Time, I wish you a Happy New Year and a happy 2025. We'll see you next time.